It's easy being opposition. You can chirp from the sidelines and avoid serious policy decisions. And that's why, up until now, the NDP has been somewhat impervious to scrutiny. No one thought they had any viable chance of winning the federal election. But now, Tom Mulcair's leading in the polls. Maybe it's time we take a closer look at this party. Yesterday, I came across a Canadian press story entitled "Canada's Embassy in Ukraine, Used as Pawn in 2014 Uprising." The piece quotes Paul Dewar, the NDP's foreign affairs critic, is taking issue with Canada's embassy protecting pro-democracy Ukrainians during the height of the war in Kyiv. Recall back then, protesters were literally being gunned down in the street as they fought against Putin's puppet, the corrupt, oppressive Viktor Yanukovych. So Canada opened its doors to these protesters for safe haven, and that's controversial. Why? Well, Paul Dewar says, quote, "What would have happened had the revolution gone the other way and Yanukovych stayed? If things had gone that way, not only would our credibility have been undermined, but also the safety and security of our staff." Well, first of all, the purpose of an embassy and foreign affairs more generally is to protect Canada's national interests, and supporting democracy and Ukraine's independence is very much in Canada's interest, wouldn't you say? And sometimes that requires some calibrated risk. Dewar's strategy seems to suggest that Canada shouldn't stand up for what's right, because what if what's wrong wins? Paul Dewar says, well, what if it had gone the other way? Well, it did go the other way in Iran during the revolution, but Canada did the right thing anyway. Recall that during the Iranian Revolution, when the U.S. Embassy was stormed, Canada helped rescue 6 American diplomats. It was a proud moment for Canada. Our diplomats lied to the Iranians in order to save lives. Sure, it was irregular and perhaps contrary to the principles of embassy diplomacy, but in the end, Canada took a moral position and stood up for good versus evil. What if is not a foreign policy? See, Paul Dewar is not making a moral claim. Understand how base his argument is. He's not even saying what we did was morally wrong. He's saying Canada made an executive decision to side with and protect the pro-democracy protesters in Kyiv, and it might have been risky. Thanks for the clarification, Paul, because until now, I thought that standing against Putin was devoid of risk. Dewar, who is really nothing more than a highly paid newspaper pundit, is an unserious man, unserious about how power is wielded and about how decisions are made. Canada, in Ukraine, in Israel, and a few other regions, is moral and principled, beyond our power. This is what the left used to call soft power: rhetoric, symbolism, foreign aid, training to punch above our weight. Aside from Iraq, Canada isn't on the front line shooting guns, despite my best efforts, but we give encouragement, advice, training that is crucial to our interests, while also being risky. It's moral purpose in action. Paul Dewar and his party of conscience criticize this? But this is the NDP we're talking about, the party that has historically opposed every war, even World War II. The guys who would have us do nothing against ISIL. These are the guys that wouldn't even acknowledge the attack on Parliament Hill was a terrorist attack. And remember, Paul Dewar isn't writing as a private individual. This isn't a hobby. This is his job. Tom Mulcair has bestowed upon him the title of Foreign Affairs Critic. What he says is the view of the party, and that begs a final chilling question. Would an NDP government have handed over these democracy activists to Yanukovych's secret police? The simple point here is that if Canadians lack the courage to stand up against dictators, even in the most basic ways, why even have a foreign policy at all? But that's just my opinion. In the Kremlin, attitudes are very different. In Paul Dewar and his boss Tom Mulcair, Vladimir Putin has a new friend, a man he can work with.